presumptuous. I don't know you, but I know you all across the country. This is not okay. I want to speak briefly here and then discuss this with you. So, I am very pleased to be here. Thank Rick Carter especially for bringing me here. This is personal for me. I was born in Clawson. I grew up in Birmingham. I came to Clarkston when I was in high school. My father was a Chrysler engineer. I'm a product of the Michigan Public Schools. And I've been thinking about this since I came in last night. We lived on Park Lake in Clarkston. And I could walk to a vantage point on a Friday afternoon when I could look down on I-75 when I was in high school in the 70s. Friday afternoon was wall to wall, new pickup trucks and campers and boat trailers heading up this way. And nobody looking at that then could have imagined that we would be standing here talking about Flint, Michigan being one of the most violent cities in the country. I wrote a book about my work called Don't Shoot. It came out about 2 years ago. In the first chapter it says, I went through elementary school and middle school delivering in Detroit. And Detroit was at that time one of the centers of the first American airline epidemic. It was murder city then. I was a socially conscious young man, and I gave more thought to what was going on in Tibet than what was happening to black folks in Detroit. And I am ashamed of myself because of that. Black communities all across the country are producing the stories that you just heard. And it has two sides as far as I'm concerned. So one is the death of the dying. And I can go to virtually any city in the country and go to a neighborhood and start driving those streets or walking those corners, and there will be street shrines to the dead on the corners and in the middle of the streets. Wilted photographs and the wet teddy bears and the flowers and the never forget cards. This is normal. And it is wrong and it is not okay. And none of those are white neighborhoods. None of them. And the flip side of this, and again, this is all, you've just heard the whole thing. So many of the men who are not dead are locked up. Or they are coming back from getting locked up, or they are about to be locked up again. There's new math on this. Right now, in these great United States, if you are born a black man and you do not graduate high school, you serve a 70% chance of going to prison during your lifetime. And this next one, even I have trouble believing, so I double-checked it, and it is true. If you are a black man in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, the math says that your lifetime chance of at least going to jail is now approaching 100%. And white folks don't live like this either. So these are American scandals, and they are not okay. And this is a meeting, a rally, a conversation about state action, and it is the right conversation to be had. Washington has abandoned us on these issues. There is no leadership coming out of D.C. on any of this. There is a lot going on around the country, and it is happening at the state and local level. If we do not carry this, if we do not fix this, it is not going to get fixed. And the good news is that there is actually very real progress being made on this. In the neighborhoods where this is going on, everybody eats. So I get in fancy academic debates with people who are at one or more removes from this, and they will say, people have different sorts of feelings about guns. There's a gun debate. People have different feelings about drugs. There's a drug debate. People have different feelings about time. That people can't put food on their table. They can deal with it somehow. And I understand that all that is true. We are talking about people killing each other. Yes. And there is, as a practical matter, no debate about this. It is wrong. It causes unbelievable pain. It is unacceptable. And this is a room full of people who are people of faith. They do not just speak it, they are living it. People of faith have a special talent for understanding this issue, because people of faith have no problem saying, I love you and you are doing wrong. And you must stop what you are doing. But we wish for you redemption. And at root, what is working all across the country is a very practical, doable, real-time version of something that is that simple and that profound. So here is the way lethal violence works. In the most dangerous neighborhoods, nearly nobody will shoot anybody. People think there are dangerous neighborhoods. Really, there aren't. There are neighborhoods with very small numbers of dangerous people in them. We do the math on this, and we do the research on it. What you find in city after city after city, violence is driven by people in gangs, in drug crews, in groups, in sets. Ms. Bingham, you said your son made a bad decision. And maybe that's right, it probably is right. Knowing nothing from where I stand, I'm going to bet he had bad friends. Because bad friends get you killed. And when you look at the little groups of guys who drive this stuff, you cover an entire city, you add up all the gangs and crews and drug sets and little neighborhood posses and 7 guys who roll on a block and sell dope. They will, all of them together, add up to about 0.3% of the population of the city. Most of them are not terrible people. They are scared. They have people trying to hurt them. They are doing what they do to protect themselves. Their friends are watching. And the ladies here will get this. I tell my students, there is no stupider organism on the planet than a young man with his friends watching. They will literally get themselves killed rather than say, this is dumb, I'm going home. But in their heart of hearts, they are saying, somebody get me out of here. And we are not doing it, and it is turning out that we can do it. But it is very small numbers of people. In the most dangerous neighborhoods, so cities are not really dangerous, generally they have places that are dangerous, it's about 5% of the young men. Not all the young men, not everybody with a criminal record, not everybody wearing their pants down, not everybody who listens to gangsta. When my pin-suited friends, pinstripe-suited friends say gangster rap is the authentic voice of the community, I want to throw them out of an authentic window. Because they do not know what they are talking about. Most people, even most of the street guys in the most dangerous places, They do not want to hurt anybody. They do not want to get hurt. They love their mother. They love their little brothers and sisters. They are scared and vulnerable. And yes, they do terrible things. But they are not mostly terrible people. It turns out, in principle, to be remarkably easy to address this. So, everybody who has a stance on this issue is right. So if you are in law enforcement and think that violence is wrong and people need to be held individually accountable, that is correct. If you are a social service worker and you think that young men who are doing these terrible things are probably victims and they need help, that is correct. If you are the pastor on the block and you think that things that are wrong and people should not do them and that is a moral obligation, you are correct. All of that is true. What we usually find is people who believe those things think that they believe them separately and that those ideas are in competition. They are not. So all that this thing called Operation Ceasefire is getting people together. You need law enforcement. You need social service providers. You need Ms. Bam and community elders. You can sit down face to face with the guys who drive this stuff. They do not hide. They are not undercover. We know who they are. And we can put them in a room and we can say to them, we know who you are. We know what you're doing. We want to keep you alive. We want to keep you out of prison. We've got law enforcement in the room, and 95 out of 100 folks in law enforcement would rather some gangbanger get a living wage job, pay taxes, and contribute to her pension than spend the rest of his life in a federal box. Right? They don't think he's going to do it, but they would prefer that he did. Everybody would rather that communities take over their own governments. Healthy communities are healthy because they have community standards and everybody follows them, not because everybody's scared witless of the feds. Growing up here, who was afraid of the police? Yep, some of us were. Growing up here, who was afraid of your mother? Right? That's how it works. Right? So we would rather people listen to their own. And at the end of the day, if people are shooting people, that is not all right. Something needs to be done about that, and they need to know that something is going to be done about it. But they need to know that that is being done in the spirit of loving kindness and not because the cops hate black boys. Right? So all ceasefire is putting that together, getting the right people on the seats, and having our side say to them, we care about you, we want to keep you alive, we want to keep you out of lockup, we would like to help you, and this is not a negotiation, we're not asking. And when you walk out of here, this is group stuff going on out there, you know it, we know it, and the first group, drug crew, set, neighborhood posse, whatever you want to call it, the first one of those groups in this city that puts a body on the ground, state, local, and federal law enforcement is coming. And this is group stuff. It's back and forth beef, it's vendetta, it's you guys telling each other you've been disrespected, so you have to go light that out. So now we're treating it like group stuff. And maybe one guy that pulled the trigger. But everybody else is selling drugs, and they've got outstanding warrants, and they've got unpaid child support, and they've got unregistered cars, and they're violating the probation and parole, and you've got state cases that the feds can adopt. And if you make us, we will make that happen. It is up to you. You are in charge now. Thank you for your time. You are free to go. My mother tells me she taught me everything I know about this. And actually, I think basically she's right. This is pretty common sense stuff. It is work to put together, it is work to keep together. So the message to the state that a kind of seed funding and investment capital is necessary here, that is absolutely right. We are seeing states all across the country making this happen. There's a 20-year history to this work. For the longest time, people couldn't quite believe it was real. You're going to sit these guys down, the most dangerous people in the city, and they are going to listen to you, and they're going to put their guns down. It seems ridiculous, but it's true. And again, if you'll forgive me, one of the things that might have kept your son alive is for all of his friends to know that if they crossed this line, law enforcement was coming in heavy, that their mothers wanted this to stop, that their community embraced them but rejected what they were doing. And these guys are not crazy, they are not playing traffic, they do not want to die. Many of them are looking for an excuse to back out and go home, and this can give it to them. But it turns out that it really does work. And what many states are doing is saying, we have done our homework, this is real, it's a little bit unexpected, but we have cities that need it, and we are going to collectively bring it to the places that need it. Ohio is doing this, California is doing it, New York State is doing it, Connecticut is doing it, North Carolina is doing it. And there are economies of scale, people learn from each other, they progress together. Everybody who does this invents something new, and we can move it around quickly. We are doing this in Detroit. We had our first face-to-face meeting with the gang guys in the Eastern Precinct about 6 weeks ago. Early feelings are that it is already showing impact. We can't prove that yet, but we see that a lot. We are about a year into doing this in New Orleans. So New Orleans, consistently, historically, one of the most dangerous cities in the United States, battered by Katrina. We had our first face-to-face meeting with the street guys in October of last year. And year-to-date, homicide citywide is down 25%, and this kind of gang-involved homicide is down over 50%. This is work that people can really do. And if people believe that, then the rest of it is the hard Scrabble details of how you actually make it happen. So let me stop there. We've got a little bit of time for your thoughts, and any questions I can answer, let's do that.
Good idea.
Elaine Winter from the MCC up in Detroit, or down in Detroit. After you have the face-to-face with them, do they know that they have a place to go for help, or do you just say goodbye and then make the decision? Is there any follow-up after the face-to-face?
So absolutely yes. So the three planks in this are prior warning of a new and different kind of law enforcement response, and you hope that the warning works and you don't have to do it. The point is not enforcement. The point is we want to get people's attention so they don't touch that hot stove. What we call the moral voice of the community. So killing people is wrong, and there is this weird implicit conspiracy. So I'm going to caricature everybody here, but we don't have a lot of time for subtlety. Law enforcement think they're psychopaths, right? And you don't reason with a psychopath. The sort of community-based people think they're victims, and you don't blame the victim for what they've done, you help them. And what turns out to be true, and this is so clear as you see it, the one thing we will tell them is, you are a man, you are a citizen, what you are doing is not only illegal, it's wrong, so don't do it. And since nobody tells them that, they think a lot of us actually approve of it. They don't get how much we don't like this. And then the third piece is what we call outreach and support. And part of putting this together is assembling the very best package we can. And most cities have a lot of this going on, but it's not usually focused the way we would want on the 0.3%. They need a safe haven. They need a place to deal with their trauma. They need new relationships. If you really believe that people you run with will take a bullet for you, having somebody say, come to my agency and I'll do an intake assessment doesn't really have the juice that we need to pull somebody away from the streets. So you need real-time, like what AA would call a sponsor. You need what we call the big small stuff. And nobody's ready to start thinking about going to work if they can't get the tickets off their driver's license so that they can register their car so they can drive to work legally, right? You put all that stuff together, you can get people to a point where they can start thinking about going back to school and getting job training. So part of it is putting that whole package together. I'm not in charge of it. I'm used to that.
The impact of racial profiling and all of this, your views on that? There are two poles that law enforcement can go to on this. So one is thinking there is a dangerous kind of person out there, and what nobody wants to say is, and of course they're young black men. There are dangerous neighborhoods out there, and everybody in the neighborhood is a potential problem. The other end is saying, actually, hardly anybody is going to do this most serious stuff, and we are going to meticulously identify them, and we are going to engage with them. And you're not going to be surprised at which my preference is, right? And it's not just because focusing on the impact players works better, which we think it does. It is because we go back to this core community issue. Communities are healthy because they set and impose their own standards. And when a community is so angry at law enforcement, and I work almost entirely in historically oppressed black communities, and they're not just angry at the police because of what happened this year. They're angry at the police because of what happened this century, and the last century, and the century before that, and they are justified in that anger. White folks don't get this. They really don't. I work with black adults who saw their grandparents lynched. This is not old news. You know, my generation, my people think that this is sort of like the Lone Ranger. It's kind of interesting, but not. It's old stuff. It is not old. And when we compound that by saturation of patrol and stop and frisk and things like that, not only are we making people angry today and being inefficient, but we are playing into this old racial stereotype, this very old anger. And what we're beginning to understand, and lots of people in law enforcement get this out, that when law enforcement is seen as illegitimate, it drives violence. If I know who killed my friend, I have two substitutable choices. I can call the cops and work with the DA and get that guy arrested and convicted. Or I can get a gun to my friends and I can go take care of it myself. And where people feel that the police are illegitimate because of profiling and other things, what we get is a gun to my friends and we've got another body, and now we've got a gang beef, and on it goes. So this isn't about community relations anymore, right? This is about concrete, hardcore crime prevention. And one of the big deals on this, so this is a room of people of faith. I was raised Episcopalian. And in the Nicene Creed in my church, there is a phrase in which we ask forgiveness for things done and left undone. Everybody is a sinner on this one. Everybody. And what we help communities work through is, if the police are willing to say, we have been indiscriminate, we have not solved the problem, inadvertently, maybe by locking everybody up, we have done harm, and we wish to do something else, right? We want to focus rather than be carpet bombers. The flip side is saying to the community, nobody can set community standards from the outside. If the only people saying don't carry guns and shoot people and stand on the corner and sell dope to passing cars are from the outside in uniform, that's not going to cut it. We outsiders can't create community standards, only you can do that. And a community that knows that law enforcement is willing to be flexible every single time they stick their hand up and they say, and we haven't been doing that, we know that, that's on us. And it creates this middle ground where everybody can get together and say, not through profiling, but because the guys who drive this are exceptional and they are identifiable. And you can say to them, not just that we're going to drop federal prosecution on your head, we want to keep you alive, we want to keep you out of prison. This is a real phrase out of one of these columns. One of our partners stood up and looked at 40 of the most dangerous people in the city and said, you have been targeted to be safe. And we're working very closely with PICO. PICO is running its National Lifelines Project, which is around this. And the identifying phrase for PICO Lifelines is alive and free. And that is what we want for the most troubled amongst us. We want them alive, we want them out of prison, and it's very hard to find anybody who doesn't want that. And that turns out to be common ground that we do not realize we have, but it's there and we can move to it, and then you can do the hardcore engineering work to reach out to the special street guys and make this happen.
Ceasefire. I was a convicted felon and I was tried and convicted as an adult when I was 16. And I struggled with housing and job opportunities, a minimum wage job. I have grandchildren now, trying to raise them and do good things in my community since I've been released from prison, been discharged, paid all my tithes, all my fines, fees, restitution. With ceasefire, there's going to be opportunities for felons that are back in gangs, because that's the only option that they have once they're released. Because there's no opportunity for them as far as jobs and housing.
So I am not for a second going to pretend that this is going to fix all of that, because it won't. I say to people, I don't care about crime. And of course that's not really right. But it's right in the sense that what I really care about is communities. And communities where people are afraid to go outside are not communities that are ever going to thrive. You cannot do economic development or work on schools or any of those things we care about when the violence is so high and the disorder is so high that the community is that dysfunctional. So this is designed to eliminate, address, enormously reduce that problem. It does a really good job of that. There is long-term work that needs to be done. And I think the tide is finally turning on this. We're coming out of this several generations of fanaticism about crime and punishment, and you can see it changing. And a lot of these core issues that you're dealing with, I think we will be making a movement on them. This will not change things quickly. It just won't. I'm sorry about that, but it won't. It will stop the shooting. And I'm just going to take issue with one thing that I'm not sure you said this, but it gets said a lot. which is that unless these guys can get a good living wage job, they're going to go back to the gang. This is going to continue. And that just turns out not to be right. This is not about even fixing all crime. Right? One of the things my angry community partners say all the time is there's as much dope in the suburbs as there is here, but it's only our young men that are getting arrested and our doors that are getting kicked in. I said I came from Clarkston. They're right. They're really, really right. But I work in places where groups of young men are carrying guns and using guns and selling dope and using dope, and people are terrified. There are a lot of places where people are selling dope and using dope, but they're not using guns, and people are not terrified. And those places we call the suburbs. Right? There's a lot of crime in a lot of places, but there isn't the violence, there isn't the gunplay, there aren't the grieving mothers. This is about that, and it is very specifically focused on that. And our hope is that when we get that right, we can make longer-term headway on these other, really, actually more important issues. But we've got to keep people alive. We cannot have communities where every adult man has a felony jacket. We cannot survive that.